This is The Brief on unlocking collective genius and maximizing team intelligence. So we're digging into the book Team Intelligence. And, it pushes back hard on needing some lone superstar leader. It says what really counts is the team's collective genius. Okay, first, let's drop the alpha leader idea and chasing endless traits. That whole aggressive leader thing, it's based on flawed, debunked wolf pack research from the 70s. Really, just stacking a team with smart folks often means, well, smart jerks who don't mesh. Being smarter together, that's the key. Second, be the leader people choose to follow. That's it. People follow because you make them feel a better future is possible. It's not about 20 traits. Like Paul Erdos, his math genius, his one super skill, made people want to collaborate, even with his social awkwardness. Finally, boost team intelligence by focusing on dynamics, not just talent. The absolute core, psychological safety, making sure people feel safe speaking up without fear. Often it's the glue players, those high EQ, team-first folks who enable this, multiplying everyone's success. It's easy to miss if you only track individual stats. So look, effective leadership isn't about individual shine. It's about unlocking the whole team's intelligence and energy, together.
Factoring can meet the cash needs of small businesses struggling with tariffs. Contact Chris at Versant Funding to learn if your client is a factoring fit.
Welcome. Today we are diving deep into, I think, one of the most significant shifts happening in high-performing organizations right now. It's this move away from the comforting myth of the superstar leader, the one person who carries everything.
Right, that heroic solo figure.
Exactly.
Okay.
And shifting towards the tangible power of what we're calling team intelligence.
And our mission for you today, really, is to unpack that.
Yeah.
To uncover the specific habits, the systems, the mindsets that actually unlock a team's collective genius.
Yeah.
Because if you think success is just about hiring, like the smartest individual in the room, well, the data suggests you're probably setting yourself up for failure.
Okay, let's start with a really striking example. Think back to the 1980 Olympic exhibition games.
Oh, yeah, this is a great one.
You had the heavily favored NBA All-Stars. I mean, a collection of the absolute best individual talent on the planet.
Seasoned pros, the best of the best.
Pitted against a bunch of college kids, basically. Team USA. Logic just screamed that the All-Stars would wipe the floor with them.
You'd think so, absolutely. But they didn't. The All-Stars, even though they were individually brilliant, they really struggled when they had to actually function as a unit.
Right.
It just proved right then and there that simply throwing highly intelligent or, super talented people together doesn't automatically make a winning team.
It sounds like sometimes you just end up with, what the research calls a group of smart jerks.
That's exactly the term. People who are brilliant on their own but just can't collaborate effectively.
So the kind of intelligence we're digging into here, it's not about IQ scores, right? Or, where you went to school.
Absolutely not. Team intelligence, as we're defining it, is about the specific skills, the attitudes, the habits, the things that help leaders and teams become smarter and more effective together.
Together. That's the key word.
It really is. We've been sort of operating under this assumption that we need to find the single smartest person to lead. But the real leverage, the real power, comes from creating an environment, a room, where everyone is enabled to be their smartest together. It's a huge distinction.
Okay, so that leads us straight into this. This big deception we've been fed for decades, hasn't it? The illusion of the solo superstar. We're conditioned, I think, to look for the charismatic one, the loud one, the extrovert, the so-called alpha.
The alpha, yeah. That stereotype.
But where did this whole idea, this damaging idea of the alpha leader even come from? Was it based on solid science?
No, not really. The evidence actually shows that stereotype of this successful, outgoing leader is deeply flawed.
How so?
Well, many truly successful leaders are actually introverted. They can be intensely private. Some are, frankly, described as flat out awkward. And this whole obsession, it really stems from L. David Meck's 1970 study on wolves. That's the origin.
Right, the wolf pack study.
Yeah.
But wasn't there a huge flaw in that original research?
A critical flaw. Meck himself later corrected his own work, which is important.
Okay.
He realized the packs he'd initially studied were mostly captive animals, unrelated wolves forced together in an unnatural environment.
So not how they behave naturally.
Exactly. In the wild, a wolf pack is usually just a family unit, parents guiding their young. It's not this system built on constant dominance, fighting, intimidation.
So the whole alpha thing is just...
It's basically a scientifically inaccurate obsession rooted in flawed early research. It's this sort of toxic concept we'd be better off leaving behind.
Okay, so if the alpha model is out, what about the more recent trend? This idea of authentic leadership. Just be yourself, bring your true self to work.
Oh boy, yeah.
We've seen some pretty shocking examples where following that advice seems to have gone profoundly wrong.
It can be genuinely unsettling when you look closely. I mean, take Harvey Weinstein.
Oh, yeah?
He achieved enormous success.
Yeah.
Oscars, Tonys, built a media empire, partly because he was being true to himself. He was driven by this stated love of creating venues for self-expression. That was his narrative.
Right, a powerful creative force.
But following that same true self narrative, that same drive, ultimately led to, well, a multi-year prison sentence for incredibly destructive and abusive behavior.
Wow. Framing it that way.
Yeah.
Connecting the massive success and the prison sentence to the same core idea of being true to self. That's really disturbing.
It is. And it shows how badly we misunderstand identity at work. Behavioral science tells us there's no single stable true self anyway.
Really?
Yeah, your personality actually shifts hour to hour. It depends on the context, where you are, who you're with, even whether you've had lunch.
So authenticity isn't about revealing some hidden core.
Not in a practical sense. In a business context, what we often perceive as authenticity is actually about someone acting consistently with the narrative others have of them. That predictability, that consistency is what builds trust, not necessarily bearing your soul.
And then there's the other quick fix companies seem to love, personality tests. The MBTI, Myers-Briggs, still used by, 88 of the Fortune 100?
Still incredibly widespread, yeah, despite overwhelming scientific dismissal.
So why do we keep falling for them? Why do they feel so accurate?
That's the 4 effect in action. It's this deep-seated human tendency we all have to believe that vague, generalized descriptions apply specifically and profoundly to us.
Like a horoscope reading.
Exactly like that. Things like, you have a tendency to be critical of yourself, or you have a great need for other people to like and admire you. Everyone nods along thinking, wow, that's totally me, even though the statements apply to almost everyone.
And it feels more damaging than a horoscope, frankly, because companies use these results to make huge decisions about careers, about team composition.
They do. And if you look at the actual evidence, the data, these tests are completely useless at predicting job performance. 0 predictive validity.
Wow.
Plus, studies show that about 50% of people who take these tests get a different result just 5 weeks later.
50%,
Yeah.
That's basically random.
Pretty much. So if we can't even categorize ourselves reliably, how can we possibly rely on these individual traits to build successful teams? It's a fool's errand.
Okay, so if the superstar leader narrative is fundamentally a trap and individual assessments are unreliable, how do we pivot? Where's the real leverage point for improvement? The math you mentioned earlier seems pretty inescapable here.
It really is inescapable. Think about it this way. If you invest time and money training one leader to improve, let's assume the training works perfectly, which is a big assumption.
Right.
You are potentially strengthening 9 one-directional relationships, the leader interacting with each of their, say, 9 team members. That's a gain of 9 improved pathways.
Okay, 9 relationships. But what if you focus on the team dynamic itself among all 10 people?
Now you're talking.
Yeah.
If you focus on improving how those 10 people interact with each other, you strengthen 45 two-directional relationships.
45, wow, okay.
The leverage is exponentially higher. The most effective, highest return path to improving performance isn't isolating the leader, it's enhancing the entire team's ability to interact and collaborate.
This is starting to sound suspiciously like William Muir's famous or maybe infamous super chicken experiment.
Yes, it's the perfect, if slightly disturbing, analogy for a lot of corporate cultures.
Remind us how that worked.
So Muir was an evolutionary biologist. He set up an experiment where he bred chickens specifically for individual productivity. He selected the hens that laid the most eggs, the decalled XL super chickens.
Okay, sounds logical. Select the best individuals.
You'd think. But what happened was these individually best chickens quickly devolved into hyper-aggressive, frankly, cannibalistic birds. They achieved their high egg count by literally pecking the other chickens to death.
Oh my God. So individual success came at the cost of the group's survival.
Exactly. The overall productivity of the coup plummeted because the stars destroyed everyone else. The system incentivized competition and dominance over collaboration.
And the contrast was the other group.
Right. Then Muir shifted his approach. He started selecting and breeding chickens based on team egg productivity, the overall output of the coop. He called them the Kinder Gentler birds, or KGBs, amusingly.
Kinder gentler birds. I like it.
And that flock. They were not only far more productive overall, but they were also social, collaborative, and, well, they didn't kill each other.
It's such a direct critique, isn't it, of corporate structures, promotions, bonuses, forced rankings that basically incentivize employees to become those self-serving, aggressive super chickens.
Precisely. Structures that make you compete against your colleagues, prioritizing your own metrics, even if it harms the team's collective success.
So the way out of this super chicken coop, the foundation for building real team intelligence, Google's big study, Project Aristotle, pointed squarely at one thing, didn't it?
It did. The single greatest predictor of team success they found was psychological safety. It's the absolute bedrock.
And how do we define that, practically speaking?
It's basically a sense of confidence within the team. Confidence that you won't be embarrassed, rejected, or punished for speaking up.
So feeling safe to ask a quote-unquote stupid question.
Exactly. Or offering a half-baked idea, or admitting a mistake, or challenging the status quo. When people feel that safety, they open up, they communicate exponentially more, and they bring forward all the crucial information that otherwise stays hidden.
Okay, but here's the really interesting twist, the part that surprised me. High psychological safety actually increases conflict, doesn't it?
It does, and that sounds so wrong at first. We usually think safety means avoiding conflict, keeping things smooth.
Right, keeping the peace.
But it increases healthy conflict, task-based conflict. When ideas can be challenged, debated, pulled apart openly, and you know the person challenging you cares about the mission, not about attacking you personally, then the ideas and the team itself become anti-fragile.
Anti-fragile, like Nassim Taleb's concept. Things that gain from disorder.
Exactly like that. Think of weightlifting. The stress and pressure don't break the muscle. They cause micro tears, and the muscle grows back stronger.
Oh, okay.
A psychologically safe environment creates that necessary friction, that productive struggle. If everyone's too scared to disagree, you just get groupthink, echo chambers, and eventually really terrible outcomes.
Okay, let's make this concrete. Applying this team-first mindset, what are the key pillars that maximize this team intelligence? You mentioned 3. Let's start with pillar 1, reasoning. This sounds like it's all about alignment.
Precisely. In any complex, high-stakes environment, teams absolutely need a North Star. Everyone needs to be pulling in the same direction.
Can you give an example?
Think about a modern F-35 fighter pilot. That pilot isn't some lone wolf maverick figure anymore.
Right.
A single mission might involve literally hundreds of collaborators working behind the scenes, cyber teams, intelligence analysts, ground troops coordinating.
Wow, hundreds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the pilot's main job isn't to dictate every single step to all those people. It's to achieve consensus and total alignment among all those different groups about the ultimate objective.
So it's not just about knowing the plan, it's about knowing the why behind the plan.
That is the critical piece. Everyone involved must deeply understand the commander's intent. Military strategists have known for centuries that no plan survives first contact with the enemy.
Things always go wrong.
Always. So when the unexpected happens, communication fails, the situation changes. Team members need to understand the underlying why, the ultimate goal, so they can adapt autonomously. They can make smart decisions on the fly, adjust their course without needing new orders micromanaged from the top. The leader's job shifts from control to clarity.
Okay, clarity through reasoning and alignment. What's pillar 2? Attention. This sounds like focus.
It is. Teams need to know what to focus on and, critically, when to focus. The story of Lego's near bankruptcy back in the early 2000s is a perfect illustration of what happens when attention dissolves.
Right, they almost went under. What happened?
Corporate attention deficit disorder, basically. They lost hundreds of millions of dollars because they were chasing too many shiny objects simultaneously.
Like what?
They expanded wildly into electronics, complex video games, overly elaborate theme parks, partnerships that diluted their core brand. They tripled their product lines, ending up with something like 14,000 different piece types in 50 different colors.
14,000 pieces. That's insane complexity.
Utterly unmanageable. They completely lost focus on their core genius, the simple, beautiful, interlocking brick.
So the turnaround CEO, Jürgen Vignenstorp, came in and forced them to refocus.
He essentially gave them what he called the gift of focus. It probably didn't feel like a gift at the time.
Probably not.
He demanded ruthless discipline, cut product lines by 30%, eliminated half the different brick types, just stripped it back to the core.
End result.
That immediate injection of simplicity and focus led them straight back to profitability. It was dramatic. And high intelligence teams maintain this kind of focus using a specific communication pattern.
Which is?
It's called bursty communication.
Bursty communication. That sounds kind of chaotic, like lots of interruptions.
It sounds like it, but it's actually the opposite. It's the antidote to the constant low-level distraction that kills deep work.
Okay, explain that.
Think of it like a really well-run scrum or a huddle.
Yeah.
You have these short, intense bursts of highly focused interaction. Everyone syncs up, aligns on priorities, flags problems, makes decisions together.
Right.
And then this is the crucial part. Everyone goes their separate ways for long, uninterrupted periods to actually do the work, get into flow.
So it avoids the constant drip, drip, drip of emails, Slack notifications, random check-ins that fragment our attention all day.
Exactly. It's about deliberate synchronization followed by deliberate focus. That rhythm is key.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Okay, finally, pillar 3, resources. You said this is about functional diversity. How is that different from how we usually talk about diversity?
It's much broader. It's not just about demographics or appearances, those can be indicators. It's fundamentally about the diversity of actual resources people bring to the table. Different skills, different knowledge bases, different mental models, different life experiences, different networks.
So functional differences that help the team achieve its goal.
Precisely. The Antwerp Diamond Heist, the real one, not the movie, provides a kind of perfect, if criminal, example.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
The mastermind, Leonardo Notarbartolo, was a brilliant social engineer, charming, great at manipulating people, but he couldn't possibly have robbed that supposedly impenetrable vault alone.
He needed a team with different skills.
He needed fundamentally different types of resources. He recruited what the crew called the genius, who was the tech and alarm expert, the monster who handled the brute force mechanics, drilling, heavy lifting, and the king of keys, who was a master forger and lockpicker.
4 distinct roles, 4 distinct skill sets.
And the success of the entire operation hinged on the fact that those skills were almost entirely non-overlapping. Leonardo, the charmer, couldn't pick the locks. The genius building the tech couldn't handle the physical demands. Each person brought a unique, essential resource. That's why this kind of resource diversity isn't just a nice-to-have for teams. It's mission-critical functionality. High-performing teams are brilliant at identifying, cataloging, and then deploying these varied resources exactly when and where they're needed most.
Okay, this idea of different roles brings us to these quiet multipliers, the people who often go unrecognized, right? The glue players.
Yes. Organizations are often obsessed with the visible star talent, the top salespeople, the engineers with the patents, the shooters in basketball terms.
The ones with the obvious stats.
Exactly. And they completely ignore, or at least undervalue, the people who make everyone else perform better. We absolutely have to talk about Shane Battier here.
The basketball player. Okay.
Statistically, Battier was, well, he was an outlier in a weird way. Michael Lewis wrote about him. He was described as, quote, at best, a marginal NBA athlete. People said he can't dribble, is slow. His individual stats weren't flashy at all.
Doesn't sound like a superstar.
Not by traditional metrics, but his statistical plus-minus the measure of how well the team performed when he was on the court versus off was enormous, sometimes as high as +10.
And what does +10 mean in real terms?
That's roughly the difference between a completely average 41-win NBA team and a 60-win championship contender. His presence fundamentally changed the team's success level.
Wow. So he didn't score the points himself necessarily, but he somehow enabled the team to win much more.
He was literally nicknamed Lego by his teammates.
Lego. Why?
Because he made all the other pieces fit together perfectly. He demonstrated what researchers call radical benevolence, always making the pass to the person in the best position to score, even if it meant sacrificing his own chance or his own stats. His value wasn't in his athleticism. It was in his incredibly high emotional intelligence and his focus on the collective. He was a massive multiplier.
And thinking about improvement. Often, the quickest way to boost a team's performance isn't trying to make a star like Battier even better at defense, right?
Yeah.
It's actually about eliminating the really destructive negative behaviors you sometimes see.
Absolutely. The leverage is totally different.
Trying to refine an already world-class skill, like, say, Draymond Green's defense in basketball, might yield tiny incremental gains, maybe 1% better.
Okay.
But stopping a negative, destructive behavior like, hypothetically, Green punching a teammate that yields massive immediate gains in trust, safety, and overall team function, you get way more bang for your buck focusing on eliminating the negatives.
So stop the bleeding first.
Pretty much. We have to create systems to mitigate these kinds of problems because just telling people to behave better or relying on individual willpower rarely works under pressure. You mentioned relying on willpower is often a losing game. Can you give an example of a system that sort of bypasses human habit to guarantee a better outcome?
The F-16 auto GCAS system is, I think, the perfect analogy for leadership here.
Auto GCAS. What's that?
Okay, so a huge percentage, something like 75% of F-16 pilot deaths were caused by something called controlled flight into terrain. Basically, flying the plane perfectly straight into the ground.
How does that happen?
Under extreme G-forces or stress, pilots can get tunnel vision or become disoriented. They lose situational awareness. Even though they might feel like they're in control, they just can't perceive the danger or react in time.
A human limitation under stress.
Exactly. So brilliant engineers decided to take the fallible human element out of the equation in that critical moment.
How?
They built an automated system, Auto GCAS ground collision avoidance system. If the plane's trajectory predicts it's going to hit the ground, the system automatically takes control and pulls the plane up, overriding the pilot's inputs. It doesn't ask permission, it just acts.
Wow. It's an automated safety net.
Precisely. And leaders should think about installing similar automatic systems in their teams. Things like having a designated, empowered timekeeper in every meeting to stop dominant personalities from hijacking the conversation. Or having clear, consistently enforced no-jerk rules that protect psychological safety. These systems stop predictable problems before they require someone's willpower or courage to intervene in the moment.
And underlying all of this, the safety, the collaboration, the glue players, it all circles back to the essential ingredients of trust, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Trust is the ultimate currency.
It absolutely is. And there's a kind of formula for it based on research. The key ingredients are benevolence, honesty, and competence.
Benevolence, honesty, competence.
Yeah.
Is there an order of importance?
Yes, and the weight is crucial. Benevolence comes first. Does the other person believe you genuinely have their best interests at heart, that you care about them?
Care for.
Then honesty. Do they believe you're telling the truth? And finally, competence. Do they believe you have the skills and ability to do what you say you'll do?
That order feels almost backward from how most business communication works.
It often is. In business, we almost always lead with competence. We try to impress people with our credentials, our track record, our expertise.
Right. Prove how smart we are.
But if people don't first believe you care about them, benevolence, and are being straight with them, honesty, your competence barely registers. It might even feel threatening. If you lead with genuine care, then honesty and competence are much more readily accepted and trusted.
We have covered a massive amount of ground here. Wow. From super chickens to F-35 pilots to diamond thieves.
Huh, quite the range.
But the core thread, the main takeaway, seems crystal clear. Real leadership success, sustainable success, isn't achieved by chasing the individual spotlight.
No, it's achieved by deliberately focusing on maximizing the intelligence of the entire collective.
Building that team intelligence.
Exactly. By creating alignment through clear reasoning, maintaining sharp focus through managed attention, and truly leveraging the functional diversity of resources, that's how you build a team that's anti-fragile, that's high-performing, and that can consistently achieve things far beyond the reach of any single superstar.
Okay, but here's the final, maybe slightly uncomfortable, provocative thought we want to leave you with today. Those NBA researchers who studied players like Shane Battier, they found that even though players like him, maybe okay shooters on paper, but huge multipliers, who made their teammates something like 63% better when they were on the court,
Yeah.
they still got paid exactly like okay shooters.
Yeah.
Their contracts didn't reflect that massive multiplier effect at all.
Oof. Yeah. That's the problem, isn't it? Organizations measure what is easy to measure, points scored, deals closed, individual metrics that are visible and simple.
Not necessarily what's most useful or impactful.
Right. They often fail to measure or even notice the invisible, benevolent, connective glue work that actually makes everyone else succeed and drives that powerful multiplier effect.
So the challenge we want to leave you, the listener, with is this. Take a hard look at your own team, your own organization. How can you adjust your metrics, How can you change your systems to actually find, recognize, and reward the invisible, perhaps benevolent work of those crucial glue players? The ones who are truly multiplying your team's success, even if their names aren't always at the top of the leaderboard.
Because if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, you certainly can't reward it. And you'll probably keep losing out to teams that understand the power of the collective. You might even be breeding super chickens without realizing it.
Processing companies can fund their growth using the cash accounts receivable factoring can provide. Contact Chris at Versant Funding to learn if your client is a factoring fit.
Welcome to the debate. Today, we are diving into, well, one of the most persistent and frankly pretty frustrating conflicts in modern organizational strategy. It's this fundamental tension between recruiting raw individual superstar talent and the essential, often invisible power of highly effective team dynamics. We're specifically looking at the phenomenon known as the too much talent problem.
And the central question really facing every CEO, every coach, every manager must be this. In modern organizations, does the established danger of too much talent, that inclination towards self-interest, internal competition, even cannibalism, does that outweigh the absolute necessity of recruiting those indispensable individual superstars?
I think the evidence, well, it clearly points towards prioritizing team dynamics, fostering psychological safety, implementing specific systems to actively mitigate the detrimental effects of self-serving superstar behavior. That has to be the core priority for leaders trying to maximize group performance today.
I see this differently. Top talent is an absolutely indispensable resource. Our focus shouldn't be on, excluding competence simply because it might cause friction. Instead, we need to strategically assemble that talent to maximize what the material calls the multiplier effect, where, high individual performance gets amplified by the right team structure.
Okay, but the fundamental issue, as I see it, is that high individual talent, especially when it's selected purely for productivity or individual metrics, it often fosters this super chicken behavior. We see this demonstrated in that famous selective breeding experiment, right? The super chickens were incredibly effective individually, sure, but when you group them together, they constantly pecked, competed, and basically cannibalized each other. And this reduced the overall output. The human parallel is startlingly clear. I mean, look at the NBA exhibition games back in 1980. You had these highly seasoned NBA All-Stars, coached by an NBA champion, and they were defeated by the college-aged student athletes of Team USA. Why? Because the All-Stars were competing with each other for shots, for individual recognition. They had too much talent that was turned inward on itself. So an effective leader's job, therefore, isn't really to be a superstar or even just hire stars. It's to maximize team intelligence by strengthening the dynamic, the pro-social relationships between team members. William Moore, the evolutionary biologist, he proved this by breeding teams of kinder, gentler birds, a group selected for their contribution to the collective, who, as a super team, ultimately laid far more eggs than those selfish super chickens.
That's a compelling argument based on the data, definitely. But I would frame the implication differently. While the destructive nature of that super chicken mentality is absolutely real, the response can't just be to exclude high competence or skills. I mean, the source material is very clear on this. Having a multiplier effect is only useful when you have something big, as in big talent, to multiply. If you staff a team only with supportive, maybe lower-skilled members, the kind who are fantastic at supporting each other's losses, you will likely fail to achieve anything substantial. Right? They might have a perfect social dynamic, but they lack the necessary technical, the engine, really. And moreover, this too much talent problem, it's inherently context-dependent. The research showed pretty clearly that the problem specifically crops up in situations of high task interdependence.
Okay, can you just define that for us clearly? What does that mean?
Yeah, sure. High task interdependence means everyone needs to rely heavily on each other's instantaneous, moment-to-moment performance. Think of a basketball team running a fast break. The outcome relies entirely on fluid, mutual adjustment. But look at baseball. Research on star talent accumulation, specifically citing the Yankees, showed essentially no upper limit on how many stars they could accumulate. Why? Because baseball has low task interdependence. The pitcher throws, the batter hits. It's largely sequential and individual. So context dictates the strategy. And the true focus, I believe, should be on finding those glue players like Shane Battier, whose high emotional intelligence and team orientation act as the crucial multiplier, turning those high-talent individuals into cohesive championship-winning units. Ignoring individual skills entirely because of potential disruption, that seems like a waste of time if the underlying technical competence just isn't there.
I hear you arguing for context, but let me give you maybe a different perspective on where modern high-stakes organizations actually land on that spectrum. While baseball might have low interdependence, okay, the highest stakes modern environments, whether we're talking about complex corporate problems, multi-system integration, or military operations like F-35 combat missions, these are almost universally high interdependent scenarios. It's not just one pilot flying one plane. Lieutenant Colonel Justin Hazzard Lee explained that flying a single mission might require convening hundreds of people in the briefing room. You've got intelligence analysts, cyber teams, space forces, all needing to coordinate.
Okay, that sounds incredibly complex, but how does the super chicken behavior specifically sabotage that kind of complexity?
Because success is predicated on consensus, communication, and immediate alignment, with the material calls reasoning. The arrogance and competition typical of super chickens actively destroys the shared attention, destroys the ability to reason that's required for mission success. The highly compensated exceptional fighter pilot cannot afford to be the arrogant, pompous, self-centered jerk we see in the movies, because one failure in communication, one breakdown in that shared understanding results in catastrophe. Arrogance inhibits learning, it inhibits listening. Therefore, in these environments where the cost of failure is, frankly, astronomical, collaboration becomes the primary skill. And this makes the super chicken problem the rule, I would argue, not the exception, in high-stakes environments where interdependence is just inherently high.
I don't buy that entirely, because it sounds like you're suggesting we should actively exclude competence just to avoid potential friction. Success depends on diverse, specialized resources, unique knowledge, highly specialized skills, varied life experience. If you exclude high talent because they might be difficult, you fundamentally reduce those resources and you lower the ceiling of what the team can actually achieve. I mean, take the famous Antwerp diamond heist crew. They succeeded initially precisely because each member, the monster, the genius, the king of keys, brought a unique, specialized, high-level skill set, right? That was an essential diversity of resources. The failure only came later, due to the sheer incompetence and, frankly, lack of nerve of the last-minute driver, who was a low-competence addition. The team needed the genius to override a magnetic signal. The team needs that expertise to be present. We have to balance the skills and ensure the technical competence of the high talent is there, not just homogenize the team into some comfortable but ultimately mediocre unit.
But if the genius is too arrogant to listen to the king of keys, they still fail. That interdependence is key.
Precisely. And that brings me to my next point. Beyond just the question of composition, who's on the team, we also have to talk about how we motivate the talent we do hire. And right now, the system seems fundamentally broken, which just exacerbates the friction we see in these talented teams. The injustice is that organizations focus almost entirely on easy-to-measure individual metrics. Points scored, sales totals, maybe hours worked, which inherently incentivize that self-serving super chicken behavior. And this misplaced focus, it leads to low compensation and low status for the high-value multipliers, those glue players. Shane Battier, who we both agree was pivotal in turning the Miami Heat into a dynasty, he had a career plus-minus close to +6. Now, for listeners who maybe don't follow basketball metrics closely, that is described as an enormous, almost Herculean impact. It represents the difference between like a 40-win season and a 60-win championship season. But his contribution was statistically invisible to traditional metrics. Why? Because he was performing these benevolent behaviors that often violated his own personal individual interests but dramatically benefited the team. We are currently rewarding the self-serving star while consistently overlooking the glue player who consistently does things that are, as the material puts it, desperately needed to help a team cohere and succeed.
Okay, I agree completely that those traditional metrics are a massive part of the problem. They absolutely reward the wrong behaviors. But let's maybe push back a little on the idea that the solution is simply to create a new set of metrics to capture benevolent behavior. I mean, it's often impossible to perfectly measure the absence of conflict or the presence of trust. Instead of just relying on hiring only benevolent people, the solution, I think, must be proactive and systematic. We have to build systems that automatically prevent negative behavior from ever breaching the social contract, regardless of the individual's talent level.
How do you propose we automate human behavior? That sounds difficult.
By addressing the biggest liability of the superstar. Think about a player like Draymond Green. His biggest gain isn't necessarily refining his already masterful defensive or passing skills. The fastest way to elevate his team's performance is by implementing a system to stop his harmful repetitive habits, like his history of technical fouls or unsportsmanlike acts that result in suspensions. This is an organizational liability, right? Just as F-16 pilots receive the auto GCAS system, which is essentially a system designed to override the pilot if they fly too close to the ground, preventing them from crashing due to distraction or G-force loss of consciousness, we need an equivalent early warning system for social contract failures. Something maybe as simple as using a vitals tracker to signal rising anger could alert a coach to rotate him out before the destructive habit occurs. This is how you automate willpower, essentially, and protect the team from the superstar's known liability, because relying solely on that superstar self-control is often, well, unreliable. And these systems that protect the social contract are so critical because psychological safety isn't just a nice-to-have, it is the necessary precursor for converting individual talent into collective genius. Without safety, people suppress dissenting views, they suppress crucial information, and that leads directly to what we could call team stupidity or inattentional blindness. We saw this tragedy play out with the Challenger space shuttle, didn't we? Engineers knew about the faulty seal issue, but they were too uncomfortable, maybe too intimidated by the power structure to keep bringing it up forcefully enough.
Or in the fictional but perfectly illustrative example, the Death Star.
Exactly. Engineers apparently built it with a fatal flaw, that thermal exhaust port, because they were absolutely terrified of their abusive project manager, Darth Vader. This lack of safety actively prevents valuable resources, that highly specialized knowledge and insight, from being shared. Therefore, the team's social contract, where people feel safe to speak up without fear of punishment or retribution, that has to be prioritized above everything else. Without safety, all that individual talent is just hidden, untapped potential.
Okay, I fully acknowledge psychological safety's role in information sharing. Absolutely critical. But I want to pivot back slightly to the materials finding that high psychological safety also leads to higher rates of useful conflict and anti-fragile ideas. The goal isn't just comfort, right? If you are too scared to disagree, you stay quiet and the team makes terrible decisions because nobody is challenging the quality of the ideas floating around. We need the freedom to have strong ideas push against each other so that both the ideas and the team get stronger, like lifting weights essentially. And to benefit from this productive clash, you still fundamentally require competent individuals with strong, diverse skills to push back against flawed ideas. If you have low competence across the board, safety just means everyone is comfortable supporting mediocre ideas and, patting each other on the back for a terrible outcome. Safety merely unlocks the ability for that essential, diverse talent and high expertise to productively clash and strengthen the final outcome. It doesn't create the outcome itself.
So we've really established that maximizing team intelligence is far from a binary choice between, finding raw talent or ensuring smooth dynamics. The tension is acute. How do we harness the specialized skills of the expert without importing that self-serving cult of self mentality and the associated liabilities that can just destroy collaboration?
Yeah, the core lesson we keep returning to, I think, is that leaders must first clearly understand the context, specifically the degree of task interdependence in their particular work, and also the necessary dynamics, things like the roles of glue players and the level of psychological safety required. Only then can they effectively optimize the talent mix. You can't afford to simply remove high competence, but you absolutely must manage its associated liabilities.
Absolutely. And we have to recognize that many organizations, despite knowing better perhaps, are still unintentionally rewarding those self-serving super chickens through archaic individual metrics. And this often comes at the direct expense of genuine glue players and the profound benefits of collective genius. That fundamental shift in attention, and maybe more importantly, in incentives, that seems to be the only way to truly unlock our collective potential.
Factoring can meet the cash needs of staffing companies looking to expand. Contact Chris at Versant Funding to learn if your staffing client is a factoring fit.